Today we're going to do a spoiler review of The Black Phone from director Scott Derrickson. Let's get into this.
What's your favorite scary movie? Amy.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Well, Pennywise the dancing now.
We're gonna get you. Oh, Lord on the beast!
God, don't do that.
But sometimes death is better.
Hey everybody, what's up? KillJoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Today we're talking a little bit about The Black Phone, something that I cannot wait to talk about because this is a very interesting movie. Before we get into that though, I just want to make it very clear that there are spoilers in this. If you have not seen The Black Phone yet, do not watch this video. You will have it spoiled. Don't spoil yourself. Just go into a movie blind. Jesus, people, come on. And also, if you could like this video and subscribe to KillJoy Jake, that would be pretty awesome. I'd appreciate that. Man, that would make my heart grow 3 sizes too big, and then my chest would explode probably. So now getting into this. Talking about The Black Phone, I want to address something from my spoiler-free video, which, by the way, if you're still watching this and you haven't seen it yet, spoiler-free review up here, you still can watch that. Check that out. I don't spoil nothing in that video. In that video, I was a little harsh on The Black Phone, and a lot of people commented saying, well, Jake, you went into this expecting a masterpiece, that's why you hated it. I went into this expecting a masterpiece because this is the same creative team behind one of my favorite horror films from the 2010s, Sinister. I love Sinister, like, so much. It is one of those movies that I saw it first and I liked it, you know, but the more I come back to that film, the more things I love about it. Sure, I have a few gripes with Sinister that I see reflected in The Black Phone, but regardless, I still love it. It's still one of my favorite films of the 2010s, and Scott Derrickson just has this certain tone that he brings to his films that is definitely present in The Black Phone. I had a few problems with this film though. Don't get me wrong, I loved it, but it just wasn't the 10 out of 10 amazing, oh my god, this is the best horror film of the year. I never felt that one time watching this film. I really don't think it's not even close to the best horror film of the year, which is really unfortunate. I really thought that this creative team would be able to pull that out, especially with a recreation of a Joe Hill story. I'm like, this is too big to fail. But it's like a kind of a middle of the road film for me. And I'll explain why. The entire opening act of this film is just, it has too many problems for me to just say that this is a masterpiece, because it's so, by the time you get to the second act, everything that was wrong with the first act is gone. Like, they just threw that out, and the movie really does start about 30 minutes into it, and then it gets good. Then it gets amazing, but this beginning is rough. You have every single time something scary is about to happen, it just fades to black. Imagine this. Imagine you're watching It 2017, and when the clown shows up with Georgie's running up to the little sewer drain, you see, hey there, Georgie, and then it just fades to black, and then you're just left to assume that Georgie got eaten by the clown and all that. It's not as effectively scary. If you just fade to black, that's just so... God, that's so lazy. Like, it's one of the laziest things I have seen in film all year. Like, and I've seen some, like, some really low budget things this year, and that was the laziest thing I have seen across the board, man. You should have showed that to us. You should have showed to us the kidnapping stuff, because that would have made it so much scarier. It would have made us actually care about those characters because they come back later as ghosts. It's such a missed opportunity. I don't know. That was my biggest problem with it. That knocked so many points off immediately from the get-go, and I really was going through the rest of this film with some low expectations because of that. It was just, I don't understand why they would do that. I mean, it's the same, it's a very similar story to It from 2017, and man, I mean, it's just not done the same way. You need that element of something really scary happening to establish this grabber character is a scary character, and you don't do that in this film, making Ethan Hawke's performance a little less impressive. I mean, he kills it. He's awesome. But like I said, by the time you get to Finney in the basement, this movie really does start, and it really does pick up. But this first act is atrocious, man. And the other thing about it that is so silly and absurd. Listen, I was not around in the 70s. I was not. Look at this baby face. I was not around the 1970s. But was every single kid just beating the absolute living hell out of each other to the point where they were in a bloody pulp every single day? I mean, that's basically what this movie says. That this movie is basically telling me that every kid in the 70s just beat the living hell out of each other to the point where they almost killed each other. I mean, there's a point where Finney's little sister, Gwen, hits some kid in the head with a fucking brick, and I can't believe he didn't die. Like, there's so much blood coming out of his head. What? Like, that was laughably absurd. That was so ridiculous for a movie where you're trying to make it have this like Criminal Minds edge to it, where it's like super serious, and then you have this really goofy scene with all the kids fighting. Just does not work for me at all. I don't know. That was so weird. So it's such an odd choice that just does not feel realistic at all. The opening of this film feels like a Criminal Minds episode directed by Stephen King, and that just does not work. Those two flavors don't mix for me at all. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't know, that the opening of this film I just did not care for. But like I said, we're past the bad stuff. By the time you get into the second act, this turns into a goddamn masterpiece. And I'm serious. Like, this is the most day to night difference from first to second act I have ever seen in a film ever. I mean, the second act of this starts picking up quick, like immediately. By the time you get that first conversation between Finney and the grabber in the basement, this movie just, it like has you locked in. You are locked into this film, and you are like, oh my God, I want Finney to get out of there so bad. It's so good. It's so good from that point. And Gwen has these really hilarious moments throughout. She is such a standout. She is so funny. The line about like her talking to God and all that in her room is just so hilarious. She's a really great standout and has these bouts of humor that are so necessary for this movie that is otherwise so damn dark. I really appreciated her character. Finney, on the other hand, who is just also phenomenal and just gives a great performance, played by Mason Thames, gives such a good emotional performance. Everyone's talking about Ethan Hawke, and he deserves it. He gave a great performance. He was amazing. But Mason Thames is the underrated hero of this entire flick. I mean, his performance is so emotional and so well done and so amazing. There's this scene where he's crying and he's like, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get out of this. And it's so emotional and so impactful. You are rooting from this kid from the moment you get into that basement to the time he gets out. I mean, it's really well done. It's amazing. But God, that first act, man, oh God, it bugs me so much. It bugs me so much. Another thing that I'm looking at the cast list, and it reminded me about something else I just did not like about the first act. You have this scene where Jeremy Davies, who plays the patriarch of the Shaw family, he's Gwen and Finney's father, but he's abusive. He beats Gwen with a belt, and that's horrible. That's horrifying. But they play this scene off for laughs. Like, I'm not kidding. The entire theater was uproariously laughing after they just watched Jeremy. Like, and I'm laughing because it's so darkly fucked up. Jeremy Davies beats the hell out of his daughter with a belt. And there's this moment where Gwen kind of has like a funny delivery of a line while it's happening, and the entire theater was laughing and cracking up. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? What is going on here, man? That was just like the most abusive thing I've ever seen in my life, like on screen. And there's this kind of funny line that everyone laughs at. It's just like, that didn't work for me at all either. I don't know, not a fan of that at all. That came off so distastefully that for people who really do experience that, and to make that a joke is just like, what? The first act of this movie, I feel like, was directed by they had somebody else in charge of this film for the first act. Scott Derrickson actually came in during the second act. There's a lot of, and I'm exaggerating. I'm being ridiculous. That's total hyperbole. But the first act of this film feels so studio interference. It feels like the studio wanted it to go a certain way, and Scott Derrickson and the creative team behind this did not want it to go that way at all. That's how it comes off to me. I don't know. Jeremy Davies, by the time you get into the second act, though, his character makes a little more sense, and I feel like if you would have lost that whole abusive scene, that scene would have made more sense. I think the reason they even have it in there, and they tried to play off Jeremy Davies' character as like this, oh no, he's doing that for a good reason, but it's still like, it's still abuse to a very brutal point, which kind of does not get me on board with his character. You should have had him just screaming at Gwen, saying, no, your dreams are dreams, that is it. You know, just have him screaming. That would have been effective. That would have been perfect, but you took it a little too far with his character for me to root for him, because how they write him is in a way where it's like, okay, at first he's this jerk, he's super abusive, he's whatever, and then later on in the film he's supposed to be like this, okay, no, like actually I'm doing this out of a loving reason. You don't beat your daughter if you actually love her. I'm sorry, like that, no way. Not buying that, sorry, did not work for me. Jeremy Davies is a phenomenal actor, but the writing here is poor. Did not care for that. All you had to do was change one thing, just have him screaming at her saying your dreams are dreams, you know, just say that. that would have worked for that scene. That would have worked for this whole character build that you would have done, but doesn't work for me. James Ransone was also super wasted in this movie, super hilarious. And I know in the book he has a very small part, the brother character. But I think you could have expanded that a little bit. But I love James Ransone. He was so funny in this, in the very, very, very little screen time he had. The more I see him in things, the more I just truly love him as an actor. He's so phenomenal. He stands out, especially speaking of It, he's also Adult Eddie, and he killed it in It Chapter 2. I loved him in both Sinister and this movie as well. I think he just did a great job. Like I said, very small part, but really stood out for what it was. Doing cocaine in front of like the cops and all that. That's so funny. I love that. That was great. But like I said, this is getting long-winded, but man, I just have so many feelings. I just have so many emotional feelings about this movie. I wanted it to be so good, but it's so close. And it had potential to be the best movie of the year. It really did. That ending was amazing. That whole, like I said, you get into that second act, it starts to really build. And it builds up to it and sets up this amazing ending that is really powerful and really cool. You have Finney getting him into this like hole that he was digging the whole time. He broke through this wall at one point into a freezer, and there's all these stakes there. It all comes to like something at the end about how it all works. Like you have the grabber falling into the hole. He strangles him to death while he's listening to all the ghost kids on the phone. Phenomenal. 10 out of 10 scene. Oh my God. I was like clapping and the whole theater was going nuts. It was awesome. That was such a good scene. I really did love that. Like, I love this movie. I know some people are probably clicked off of this video at this point and are commenting things like, Jake, you're so wrong about this film. It's amazing. That third act was great. It was so good. But that first act is horrible. I'm sorry. Like, it's just awful. It's a fucking terrible first act to a movie. And it's such a disappointment because of how much potential this film, this script, this story had. There's so many amazing performances across the board in this film. Everybody was great, but the writing is it's just not there. Like, I hate giving bad reviews of movies. I hate it. I hate it so much. I want to go into every single theater for every single movie that was created by somebody and say it was the best thing I've ever seen in my life, but I just can't. This is such a... This movie had potential to truly be the best horror film of the year. If that first act was better, this would have easily taken my top spot. But it's still in my top 10, but not quite there. It's going to be like an 8 or a 7. I want to talk about some more things because I have to get off of that. I have to move past it because there's so many more positives to this movie that I haven't even touched on yet. And my God, we're already going on 12 minutes. So Ethan Hawke's portrayal, by the way, is fantastic of the grabber. I mean, it really is. He's just an amazing villain in everything that he's in. He's fantastic across the board in all the horror movies I've seen him in too. But there's this touch to his character that I loved. Here's a positive for the writing standpoint. You have this thing where the grabber likes to play this game called Naughty Boy, which is like the most fucked up thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I love it. Oh, that was such a good touch. Whenever the grabber comes downstairs and he gives him food or whatever, he leaves the door unlocked on purpose so that Finn or whoever was in the basement beforehand will come upstairs and try to escape. But the grabber's just sitting there in his chair with his shirt off, and it's just so disturbing. It's such a like a effortlessly disturbing thing to have the character with the mask sitting there. The mask, which was designed by Tom Savini, by the way, is just amazing. I love the switch of the facial expressions. That is such a cool idea. I mean, God, there's so many things I love about this film. It could have been so good. It could have been so good. But yes, like I loved how crazy he was. Ethan Hawke's character was just so great. Like I said about the ending that I was just geeking out about before. My God, that was so powerful. That was so well done. The fact that he's hiding the bodies in the other house and all that's just so cool. It's just such a great story. Also, another thing about Scott Derrickson's touch, which this is something I noticed from Sinister, bringing that back into this. You have these like old school like 70s. I don't know if this is like Super 8 or if maybe we were beyond that at this point technology wise, but it's like this footage of like old school camera kind of look, and it's like footage of the grabber standing in front of that house with all the bodies in it, and it's just a really disturbing shot. They're cut in between certain scenes with the grabber and some of like Gwen's dream sequences that are just really well done. It's just really creepy. It sets the tone. It makes you fear the grabber just a little more because, like I said, I don't think I don't think the first act really set that up all that well. The ghost kids also felt very like Stephen King-y. You can feel that touch from from Joe Hill's writing that are in there. I always love that. That's always a good touch in his movies, or Stephen King's stories, as well as Joe Hill's stories, there's this aspect of like, you have to believe in the weird thing happening. And Finney buys into it really well. It's a really well done little piece of the plot like that, about how you have to buy into something like just absolutely crazy going on right now. And Finney does. He's still a child. He's still very imaginative. That's always been a theme in Stephen King's books or stories, as well as Joe Hill's, about like kids can buy into something like that. Adults are too far gone into reality in the real world to be able to buy something like a bunch of ghost kids helping you get out of a basement. But children, on the other hand, still have that wonderful imaginative look on life, even in situations like this, which are really just horrible and terrifying. And I love that aspect of his stories, something that we've seen in It, for instance, for example. That's another one that does that really well. This is a very similar story to It too, which is why I think I was kind of going into it with those expectations. There's a lot of little nods to It from 2017 too. You have Gwen riding on her bike and she has like the yellow raincoat just like Georgie and all that. The dead kids too. There's a lot of little instances like that. I really did love this film. I mean, I know I dogged on it a lot at the beginning of this video and in my spoiler-free review video, but it's just that beginning just comes off as so lazy to me and so unfocused. It really doesn't. It feels like there's another cut of this movie out there that makes more sense. The whole grabbing scene too, when he actually abducts Finney, is done in 30 seconds. Like I said, opposed to a scene in It or It Chapter 2 where you have an encounter with a kid and Pennywise. You know what's happening, but if Pennywise were to just grab Georgie and bite his head off, that wouldn't have been as effective as the slow burn with the conversation and all that. They forgot to do that in this film. That was such an important aspect of what made that original It movie from it's not the original It movie, but It from 2017 so powerful, is you have this really creepy conversation where it's like he's trying to relate to Georgie. He's trying to bring the fear out in this kid. That's so messed up. And I know that's not an aspect of the grabber's character, but it builds tension really well. It might not make as much sense for him to stand there and sit around and talk to the kid more, but without that, if you just like, for example, I think Hitchcock has a really good quote about this. I'm paraphrasing here, but like if you just showed a table full of people and they're all talking and a bomb goes off, it's not going to be as effective as if you were having a down shot looking up with a ticking time bomb underneath the table while you're listening to the conversation. That is so much more effectively like scary and like builds tension than if you were to watch an explosion go off. And this movie just does not follow that rule. That's my biggest problem with it. I give it a 7 out of 10. It doesn't go any further up on the list for me or any lower than that. 7 out of 10. I think this movie absolutely kills it in the second and third act. Flawless. Like I don't have a single problem with that, but the first act has way too many problems for me to call this thing a masterpiece, which is really a problem. It had the potential to do that too. I think it absolutely, if you are like, oh my God, that was the best film I've ever seen, 10 out of 10, it's hard to argue that, because I think that the second and third act of this movie are really flawless. But like I said, the beginning of this movie just has too many problems for me, at least, to really call it that. But if you think it's a masterpiece, I totally understand where you're coming from. And like I said, hard to argue that. What did you guys think about The Black Phone, though? I'm so sorry this review is so long, but I had to get that rant out. I feel very passionately about this movie, and it's just, oh God, I'm so close, so close. What did you guys think about The Black Phone, though? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching my little review video on The Black Phone. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content coming in the future. If you want to support this channel further, please make sure to support me on Patreon or become a channel member by clicking on that join button on my page. Thank you guys for watching again, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.